Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, Maricopa County Recorder Helen Purcell wants more public input before a final decision is made on local polling place locations. And we'll look at the results of a new survey of border residents on immigration issues. That's next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The Republican National Convention kicked off today with many GOP no-shows, including Arizona Senators John McCain and Jeff Flake. But Arizonans who did make the trip to Cleveland were excited about being there.
Just somebody that loves America as much as I do. I'm an immigrant from Mexico. I am a legal immigrant. I came here looking for a better life. America has changed since I came to the United States. It's not the same country that I immigrated to. We are racially divided, and I just, I don't call myself a Mexican American because I am an American by choice, and I just want us to make America great again. And I know that sounds like a stupid soundbite, but it's not. I mean, America is a great country.
I'm here today because I am so incredibly dedicated to having Trump our president. We've had so many lawyers as presidents, and our country is truly in the toilet. Let's put it this way, I'm so dedicated to getting Trump in that I have actually camped in a tent by myself across the country and up into Canada to talk to people. I've gone into McDonald's, I've talked to people that were working at the toll booths. I'm truly hoping and praying that I'm a delegate, I'm an alternate at the moment, and I'm really praying that if it's the good Lord's will that I'll become an official delegate, because I want to be in there and officially vote for Trump.
A reminder, make sure to watch Cronkite News each day at 4:30 for the latest convention coverage from Cleveland. Maricopa County Recorder Helen Purcell has asked the Board of Supervisors to postpone approval of polling places for the 2016 primary election. Here to explain the request is County Recorder Helen Purcell. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. You want the Board of Supervisors now to hold off approving polling places. What's this all about?
Give them another 2 weeks. We've scheduled it, the board is going to schedule it for the August the 3rd. To give some of the groups that I've been talking to, they've been calling our office and say, we haven't had enough time to look at it. We put the temporary list out there on our website the 11th of June. We sent it out to the community network later on in June. But we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to look at them. We've got 724 precincts in Maricopa County. All of those have to have a polling place, and just one. So we've got a tentative list out there. If somebody else can give us a better location that we can deal with in that particular precinct, then we're going to look at that.
I was going to say, what kind of input are you looking for?
Well, we have certain criteria for a polling place. We have to go out and analyze each one of the polling places and make sure it's handicapped accessible, make sure there's sufficient parking. So those are the kind of things we look at, and make sure the room is large enough to contain a polling place. So there's a lot of criteria that we have to go through that our people go out and check on. So if they think that they have a better idea, then we could certainly go look at that.
Have you heard any better ideas? What kind of input have you been getting so far?
We haven't gotten any specific places yet, no. So that's why I wanted to give them another couple of weeks and see if they come up with something.
And your office has been soliciting comments?
Yes, since
June.
June.
And what, community leaders and such, they're just not coming back and saying anything?
Well, kind of not until we scheduled the approval by the Board of Supervisors, which was supposed to be on Wednesday. And then we started hearing comments back, so I said, okay, let's hold off for 2 weeks. And if somebody has something else that they'd like to give us, let's look at that.
Did the Democrats push for this postponement? Were they behind this idea?
I think it was various groups. We had some Hispanic groups that talked to us about it, so it was various groups. I don't know that it was any party relationship there.
Because I had read, I think the Arizona Republic had a story that the Democrats are saying that there really wasn't enough time to vet some of these polling places. Do they have a point there?
Well, we met with the county Democratic chair last week, and he certainly didn't say anything to me about it at the time. We know that there had been some conversation about it. but maybe in talking to some of his people, that's the way he felt.
They're saying that, you know, there's just not enough time for the community input, and they're acting as though, these are Democrats now, they're acting as though it seems awfully similar to what happened in March as far as the run-up and the vetting process. Again, is that a valid argument?
Let's look at the difference between those elections. In both the primary and general election, we have 724 precincts and 724 polling places. Those were two special elections in March and May. That's completely different. Even the number of polling places you're allowed to have is different. So you look at it entirely different, and different people can vote. In this election, all of our registered voters can vote. They couldn't in the March election.
And the idea that you used to have to publicize months in advance under the Justice Department kind of guidelines, is that accurate?
Well, we had 80 days before an election, we had to send to the Justice Department the approval. Now, the 724 precincts have already been approved by Justice back in 2012 when we were still under that cap, not all of the polling places, but a lot of these polling places in the ones that we have today were approved by the Justice Department a number of years ago.
Is it difficult to find polling places? Difficult to get people to agree to have their parking lot taken up all day and the whole 9 yards?
It's sometimes impossible in certain areas to be able to find someplace. Find a place large enough, find a place with halfway decent parking, and find a place that's not taken up with parking in some other area. For instance, a school. A lot of people want us to use the schools, but on a Tuesday, they have everybody there. Churches or their outbuildings make it a much better thing because they don't have church on Tuesday.
Yes,
So,
and it has to be handicap accessible.
absolutely. We still use all the criteria that the Justice Department gave us for a polling place.
Well, then what has changed now that the DOJ is not really overseeing this?
We don't send them a report.
That's the only thing that's changed?
Everything else we do exactly like we did. We have to see in a polling place how many polling place workers we have that have to speak Spanish, have to be fluent in Spanish, because we use the Justice Department criteria on Hispanic surnames to determine how many polling place workers we have to have who are bilingual.
I asked the question because it had been argued by some that if the Justice Department was still overseeing things as they had for so long, that the situation in March never would have happened.
And I'm not sure that they would have, whether they would have objected or not. Maybe they would have said, you don't have enough polling places. I don't know that. But all of the other criteria for an election, we still use the same criteria that we used when the Justice Department was overseeing.
Okay, so you've asked the board to agree to reschedule. It sounds like they have agreed to reschedule.
Yes, they've agreed to reschedule to the 3rd of August.
3rd of August, okay.
We have to have it done by law 20 days before
Yes.
the election.
Now, was that, again, under Justice Department rules, it was 80 days?
Well, that's what we had to send them, so they would have time to look at it, so we then could look at it when we got back here.
Okay, so it was a little longer
Yes.
under DOJ rules
Yes.
as opposed to now, the 20 days.
But we've had our precincts out there for quite some
Right.
time.
Well, and how do people find their polling place right now? If they're interested, they're going, I better make sure, I better get this figured out. Where do they go?
On our website, there is a list of all the proposed polling places. They can go look at that for their particular area, look at your precinct and see where it's going to be, or look in your area if you want to look at that, see where it's going to be. And if you think you can find a place that's better capable of being a polling place, then let us know about that.
And again, if you are in the you must go to that polling place, or
Yes.
can you just go to any willy-nilly polling
No,
place?
you must go to the polling place that's assigned to your precinct. Now, if we haven't been able to find a polling place in your precinct, we may co-locate that
Right.
with the one next to you.
Okay. Biggest lesson learned from the events of March?
I know that we made some mistakes in the number of polling places that we had. We could have looked a little bit differently at those people who weren't eligible for that election, who came to the polling places, 20,000 people who were not eligible for the election. Should we have had more polling places? Yes. That's probably the lesson I learned. And we certainly want to look at everything we can about this election. We've got a big primary and general election. We don't want anything to happen, and we don't think it will. But we want to make sure everybody has the input they think they need.
All right. Well, they've got it now. Good to have you here. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The Borderlands Bureau at ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication recently commissioned a poll that was conducted in communities along both sides of the U.S. border. The border with Mexico, I should say. The poll reveals attitudes on major issues impacting border towns and residents. We spoke with Borderlands Bureau Director Angela Kucherga about the survey, along with a student from the Bureau, Courtney Pedroza. Thank you for joining us on Arizona Horizon. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Ted.
Good to have you both here. A major U.S.-Mexican border poll. What are we talking about here?
It's the first poll in 15 years where somebody has actually gone down to the border and talked to residents on both sides to hear their views on a variety of issues. And of course, the big hot button political topic is the border, people talking about the border, and we felt it was important to talk to people who live on the border.
1,400, I heard, 1,400 residents in 14 different cities, something along those lines?
The pollster, Basilis out of Austin, talked to people on both sides of the border in 14 cities, and which is 7 pairs of sister cities, all along the border from Texas, California, Arizona, everywhere.
And what did the survey attempt to find?
To really get to the heart of the issues as far as border residents are concerned. Not just the issues dictated out of Washington and Mexico City, but what do people on the border think are the important issues? And of course, we had to ask, the big topic these days is the border wall. What do people think of a border wall? Is it an important issue, and should there be a wall?
And it sounds as though there was a lot of opposition to building that wall.
On both sides, the U.S. and Mexico, a majority of people don't think it's an important issue, and secondly, do not think the border wall should be built, that the U.S. should build a border wall to secure.
That surprise you at all?
Not me, because I have lived on the border, I grew up on the border, I've covered the border for many years. I think it will surprise a lot of people away from the border.
Courtney, you were involved in this as well. Now, you are a photographer and you spoke to people along the border. Tell us what you did.
Yes. So we drove from Nogales, Arizona to Laredo, Texas, and we went to both sides of the borders and talked to as many people as we could just about what they thought about living on the border, the issues and the problems that they had, as well as what they thought the strengths were.
Did you look for certain folks to talk to? Did you talk to business people or try to find residents or visitors? Who'd you talk to and how'd you figure that out?
We talked to everyone that we could. We stopped people on the streets and asked families and students and mothers, everyone that we could.
And what kind of responses did you get?
We got a lot of people saying that they were against building the border wall and expanding it. They were saying how they felt as though they were a sense of community, even though there was a wall in between them, that they were together, even though they were separated by this wall.
Did they feel as though those who don't live along the border don't quite understand what goes on down there?
They don't. They feel as if they're misunderstood.
Yeah.
And that until you're there, you don't get what it's like to live in a bicultural community.
I know that another aspect of the poll was asking whether or not U.S. election politics were damaging. Sounds like a lot of folks thought that they were.
Yeah, on both sides, people thought that the tone of the presidential election is damaging U.S.-Mexico relations. Not relations on a local level, but between the countries. And just one thing I want to get back to as far as the wall. Because people are against a wall, it doesn't mean they're in favor of an open border. A lot of people felt that the wall was just too simple a solution, that it really didn't get to the root of the problems people face. Demand for labor, demand for drugs. I mean, a wall has not stopped I mean, we have a fence now. It hasn't stopped drug trafficking. We have lots of tunnels in Arizona. And it also, I mean, people are coming to get jobs, and there's a real concern about how are you going to deal with the root causes of those problems.
Back to the election politics as damaging. 59% in the United States side, 69% on the Mexican side. Is this basically Donald Trump, or is there more to it?
Well, we did not ask candidate-related questions. The pollster did not ask that, but his name obviously came up repeatedly. And you can't deny that the wall is tied to that particular candidate, and it will now become part of the Republican Party platform. So that was very clearly on people's minds.
Courtney, when you talk to folks at the border, did the name Trump come up very often?
It came up in almost every interview. We didn't particularly bring it up, but his name is associated with the border wall now.
Yeah. Another question was whether or not you liked your neighbors, the neighbors on the
Yes.
other side of the border. Sounds like they did.
They did, yes. They feel a sense of community. They go back and forth all of the time. It's not, they don't see it as two separate countries. They see it as one big community.
Is that something that you think the poll shows, is that most people think of the border as just an absolute war zone? It's not, is it?
No, it's not a war zone. It's not a no man's land. This is an area where people share more than geography. They share a history, they share blood ties, they share an economy, a very heavy dependence one on the other, and business ties, family ties. So as Courtney said, it really is one community.
And both sides did feel dependent on neighbors, 79% on the U.S. side, 69% on the Mexican side. Again, no real surprise there.
I think the surprise is, even for me, is that it's higher on the U.S. side, that people feel more dependent on Mexico on the U.S. side of the border. And that makes sense because a lot of the economy, local economy, depends on people coming over to go shopping, to visit, to spend money. And so they really do depend on those Mexican visitors.
You mentioned that they're not pushing for an open border, but there was a question regarding whether or not you can come and go, be able to go to one side of the border and work and then go on home afterwards, and that seemed to find some favor as well.
A lot of favor on both sides. Again, people think labor mobility. Should you be able to come across, go to work, and be able to go home? And you especially see, we have one story looking at that. In Yuma, Arizona, a lot of the agricultural the industry really needs workers. There's a huge shortage of workers, and they need people to be able to come back and forth. And right now they're struggling. And of course, people coming to work, they would rather come legally.
When you talk to folks at the border, do you find some folks that did go back and forth as best they could?
Yes, they go back and forth every day for work. It's not that surprising that they're coming back and forth each day. It's more normal.
Yeah, and as far as where things are going, do they feel as though things are getting better? Do they feel as though things are not getting any better? How are they seeing this? I know we talked about the election politics and the damage there, but just generally, life in general, what are they seeing? What are they telling you?
They're saying a lot about the quality of life. It's improving. Some people don't feel safe. Other people feel very safe on the U.S. side. It's very complex.
So did you find a difference in terms of safety and satisfaction on one side of the border compared to the other, even with sister cities?
Yes. In El Paso and Juarez, there's a big concern in safety, and they didn't trust the police. The majority of the Mexican poll respondents didn't trust the police, and the U.S. side completely trusted.
And again, you mentioned...
That was one of the huge differences.
Yes.
One of the few, as Courtney was saying. The one question was, do you trust law enforcement? And on the Mexican side, overwhelmingly, I mean, no. For good reason, there's been big issues with police corruption. On the U.S. side, overwhelmingly, yes. And people felt very safe on the U.S. side. On the Mexican side, the number one issue for the people on the poll was public safety, personal safety.
Interesting. Okay, so what do we take from this poll? What do we learn? Where do we go from here?
I think that we really need to listen and learn from the residents who live on the border, the people who know the region best and who understand the complexities of the border. And they feel very frustrated on both sides that policymakers do not take their voices and their experience and their insight into account. And I think especially during an election year, they are hoping that they can that their voices can be heard.
And what did you learn on this adventure at the border?
I learned about the border. I wasn't very familiar with it, and I think until you're there and until you talk to the people who live there and go back and forth every day, you don't really understand it, and that's really what I learned.
All right, very good. Well, congratulations to you. Congratulations to both of you. Excellent work, and thank you both for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cronkite News has the largest presence of any Arizona news organization at the national political conventions. Get full convention coverage with a uniquely Arizona perspective on Cronkite News daily at 4:30 on Arizona PBS.
When you weigh 1,000 pounds and you're on your feet, all 4 of them, for 20 hours a day, your shoes matter. That's why farriers, the men and women who shoe horses, are so important. Indeed, a bad shoe can sometimes do serious physical damage to a horse. Photojournalist Langston Fields and producer Elisa Adams spent the day with the farrier on a mission to create a custom fit for every hoof he encounters.
He's acting a little fresh, so. My name is Jeremiah Harris, and my business is Hoof and Forge. We had horses growing up, and started working with our farrier when I was 13 years old. I love everything about it. I think there's a connection that we have with horses that a lot of people have. They've been in our life and civilization for such a long time, and you get to use your brain. It's very, very scientific, but people call it an art and a science. I always tell people I've been putting shoes on horses for 18 years, but it's really only the last 7 to 10 years that I've got a true appreciation and made it a skilled trade and really realized what I'm doing. Each shoe is custom made every single time for the horse, as opposed to buying a store-bought shoe. So in order to get the proper fit, there's an equation you use, a couple different methods in order to measure the foot, so I know how much steel to cut in order to make that fit just right for him. Good boy, I know, it's scary stuff. I think if you respect them as a creature, I feel like we offer, or we ask a lot out of them in order to do what we do as farriers, and to just manhandle them is a lot to ask. So I try to be as polite as possible to them. And they generally return the favor. Shoe selection, so what type of shoe you're going to use, is also important. These are all things that an experienced farrier is going to better be able to serve your horse. That's a term that you hear a lot in farriery, is balance, making sure the foot's balanced. And so you have pitch, roll, and yaw, right? Just like a plane and roll, is to make sure as you're sighting it, that the lines are perpendicular, that the foot's underneath the horse. Because if a horse can tolerate a little imbalance, but over time, if it's chronic, it can lead to a lot of different types of injuries. You don't want to think of the shoe as an apparatus, but you want to think of it as an extension of the hoof. So just as if an athlete wears custom fit cleats, you want the same thing for the horse. You want them to feel as if they really don't have anything at all, that it's just an extension of their hoof. Every hammer blow that I do, every time that I'm reshaping or changing this shoe, I'm thinking the shape of his foot. So the shape of the outside heel is going to be different than the shape of the inside heel. So this is actually all epidermal hoof wall. So they don't feel it, just like our hair or our fingernails. And just like you can burn your nails or burn your hair, you don't feel it. If you left it on too long, you would. Or if I trimmed it down too much, good boy, Harry, then they would feel it. A lot of little details go into proper shoeing. Where I choose to put each nail is a conscious decision. As I've learned from farriers and gained more experience, you realize that there's a reason that you do everything. And it is very, very methodical. And even though every horse is different, you're able to use certain equations, you're able to use certain guidelines to make those adjustments. That being said, seeing lines, seeing curvature, having a more artistic eye certainly is helpful. It's a career, it's a passion, it's a love, it's everything. Those things combined, the fact that we do get compensation monetarily is great, But the fact that what we do is extremely important. So if you don't have a farrier, a good farrier, then you're probably not going to have a good foot, which means you're probably not going to have a good horse. So it really starts with a farrier and everything goes from there.
Farriers do not have to be licensed, but if you're looking for a farrier, Harris suggests you hire someone who is certified from a major farrier organization. Tuesday on Arizona Horizon, a new report shows improving conditions on the lower Santa Cruz River, and we'll discuss the economic impact of charities in Arizona. That's on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thanks for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.